April 30th, 1945. Berlin was no longer a capital city, but the ruins of a collapsing empire. Soviet forces had reached the heart of the city, and the final hours of the Third Reich had begun. For years, Adolf Hitler had shaped the fate of Europe and commanded the loyalty of millions. On that day, he stood underground, inside his bunker, making his final decisions. This was not a war meeting. It was not an escape plan. It was the last day of a leader who had accepted his own end and was trying to shape what would remain after his death. Today, we look closely at that moment. We examined those silent hours through a single portrait. This room had once been a place where orders were given. Now, it was a place ruled only by waiting. The walls were thick, sealing every sound inside, yet the silence within was heavier than any battlefield noise. Maps still lay on the table, their edges curled and surfaces marked, but none of them spoke of a future anymore. The light was dim. The ceiling lamp flickered, casting the same truth onto every face in the room. This meeting was not meant to plan the next move. Hitler stood at the head of the table. He did not sit. The familiar rigid posture remained, but the strength behind it was gone. His shoulders were lowered. His gaze was no longer sharp, but distant. The officers around him were silent. No one took notes. No one reached for the maps. Everyone understood this was not a military briefing. Some avoided his eyes. Others still waited for a sentence to come. Perhaps an order. Perhaps a final sign. Before speaking, Hitler paused. The pause lasted only seconds, yet felt far longer to those in the room. Time itself seemed to slow. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm. There was no anger. There was no passion. Only certainty. This room was no longer about war. It was about a man deciding how his story would end. This room is no longer a command center, but a place where endings are shaped. The walls feel closer, and the maps no longer offer strategy, only inevitability. Hitler speaks without raising his voice, knowing there is no one left to convince. Some officers still search for an impossible alternative, while others understand that the path is already ended. This is not a discussion about victory, but about what comes after defeat. The silence in the bunker carries more meaning than any spoken order. The documents on the table remain untouched, as no new orders are meant to be written. Time moves differently here, each second stretching longer than the last. Every officer understands that this decision is not only military, but historical. No one speaks it aloud, because words would fail to capture its weight. Hitler pauses briefly, as if measuring the past, rather than the moment itself. What is decided here is not just the end of a man, but the closing of an era. Any command given after this meeting will not shape the future, only control the ending. In silence, they realize this room will remain in history long after they are gone. The door is heavy. When it opens, it reveals not just a room, but the end of a war. Outside, a cold silence hangs in the air, with distant echoes of artillery. The officers waiting in the corridor exchange glances before entering. Glances that carry no hope, only acceptance. Hitler pauses at the threshold. For a brief moment, time seems suspended between staying and leaving. This is not the edge of a military decision, but of a personal ending. No questions are asked, because answers no longer matter. The soldiers outside stand at attention. Some faces still show a desire to resist. Others lower their eyes, already aware of what is coming. In these moments, silence holds more power than any command. The door closes, and with it, the sound of an era fades away. Outside the headquarters, the air feels heavy and still. Smoke hangs low, dulling the sky above them. Soldiers stand in small clusters, speaking little, if at all. Here, silence carries more meaning than words. Some officers stare into the distance as if reading invisible maps. They cling to the idea that one final command could change everything. Yet most understand this is only habit, not hope. There is no battle left to prepare for, only waiting. Younger soldiers show uncertainty in their faces. The older ones seem resigned, already aware of the outcome. For them, this is not the first collapse, but it may be the last. The quiet gives their thoughts room to grow heavier. No one asks what comes next. Everyone senses the answer. Already, this is not the wait for an order, but for an ending. In front of the headquarters, the ground has been freshly dug, yet there is no body. Only an empty grave, and nearby, almost unnoticed, 2 metal fuel cans. This grave is not meant for a man. It is meant for an era, prepared quietly, without a name. No ceremony, no crowd. The fuel cans stand there, but no one looks at them, because everyone understands their meaning. Some endings do not need explanation. This is not an escape, nor is it a confrontation. It is history choosing how to close its own chapter. The empty grave feels like a message left behind. What will be buried here is not a body, but an ideology. And sometimes, the loudest moments in history are the silent ones. After that day, Berlin fell. Germany surrendered, and the world witnessed the end of an era that had reshaped history. The fate of Adolf Hitler's body was debated for years. Conflicting reports and testimonies emerged, but one truth remained unchanged. On April 30th, 1945, the story ended. This was not just the death of a man. It was the collapse of an ideology. The moment a continent began to breathe again. History is not always written in grand squares, but sometimes in front of a silent bunker. And there are moments when only a few quiet decisions are enough to change the world.